everyone, Darkerville Trades here. Now in my last video, I talked about the meaning of words and how language and religion intermingle. Though for today, I want to talk a little bit about meaning in a different way, as well as truth. Some people have different meanings for the terms meaning and truth, and most of them are context dependent. Discussions on these can get pretty intense, so I want to try to keep this light and casual. Will I succeed? I'm not sure, but I'm willing to try. So let's take a look at the video for this week. This one was posted on my Discord channel, so all the credit or blame goes to the person who shared it with me. It comes from a channel called Cleave to Antiquity. Interestingly enough, cleave is a contronym. That is one of those words that can mean one thing and its opposite. In this case, cleave can mean to split something apart, but it can also mean to bind two things together. In the Bible, it is sometimes meant to join two things together to become one. It's used for things like marriages or to make a connection with God. So I'm going to guess that the channel is more likely associated with the latter of the two meanings, which would make it clinging to antiquity. Does this sound like a good idea? I don't think so, but let me not pick on the person's name. Let's look at the video. This is a bit of a longer one, but I'll try to keep things moving as best as I can. It's called The Futility of the Atheist Worldview. Now I'm not sure what they necessarily mean by this just yet, but I'm guessing it's going to be about how without this guy's God there's no hope or knowledge or whatever. It is pretty overplayed at this point, but I want to give this guy a fair shot. It seems that this video is part of a series which currently has 4 parts. If there's interest, or if you all just want to subject me to this guy, I can look at the other parts. But for now, let's take a look at some cleavage. I mean, Cleave's thoughts.
Only heaven silent for an answer.
Good morning and welcome to Cleave to Antiquity. My name is Pastor Ben, and today I'm going to be talking about atheism. But before we get started, let's go ahead and open up in prayer.
I'm going to skip the prayer because it isn't relevant.
So today I'm going to be talking about atheism. I want to just talk a little bit about the despondency, the futility of this worldview.
The atheist worldview. A phrase that makes about as much sense as the non-golfer's swing technique. It's a classic case of trying to define something by what it isn't, like describing non-stamp collectors as people with an empty album obsession. But let's unpack this claim of despondency and futility, shall we? Saying there's a single atheist worldview is like saying all people who don't believe in unicorns share the same life philosophy. Atheists are united by exactly one thing: a lack of belief in deities. That's it, full stop. Some atheists are existentialists, some are secular humanists, some are nihilists who somehow get involved in the philosophy part. We are a diverse bunch, united only by our shared skepticism about supernatural claims. Now about this futility business. The argument seems to be that without an eternal afterlife, our existence is meaningless. But that's like saying a vacation is pointless because it has to end. But spoiler alert, one of the reasons vacations are awesome is precisely because they don't last forever. Life without an eternal warranty doesn't make it futile, it makes it precious. We create meaning through our actions, relationships, and the impact we have on others. It's like a sandcastle on the beach. Temporary? Yes, but no less beautiful or meaningful for its impermanence. But think about it. Every action we take creates ripples that extend far beyond our limited time here. Whether it's teaching someone a new idea, or creating something innovative, or even simply just being kind to a stranger. These actions cascade through time, influencing countless others in ways we can't even imagine. It is literally like dropping a pebble in a pond. The ripples extend far beyond the initial splash. Finding hope and purpose in a finite existence isn't just possible, it's empowering. We get to write our own story, create our own purpose, and yes, even make educational content that might just change someone's perspective. And isn't that something worth living for? A chance to leave the world a little better, a little wiser, a little kinder than when we found it? No eternal reward is required, just the satisfaction of knowing that we made a difference, however small, in a brief, beautiful moment we had. Besides, if the only reason you're being good is for a cosmic reward, are you really being good? That's not morality. That's just a long-term investment strategy.
And really just how unfortunate it is for the people that are stuck in this worldview. I think that ultimately when you look at atheism itself, you don't have any foundation for any kind of truth at all. You have no essential presupposition that grounds you in truth. Everything is subjective. And
we've stumbled into the without God you can't have truth argument. It's a bit like saying you can't have breakfast without believing in the tooth fairy. Last I checked, my toast was real regardless of my metaphysical positions. But what's actually going on here? Let's break this down with the precision of a philosophical knife and the gentleness of, well, a less sharp philosophical knife. Atheism is simply not accepting the claim some number of gods exist. That's it. It's like being unconvinced when your friend swears they saw a UFO. It doesn't mean you deny the existence of aircraft, just that you're not buying this particular claim. To say atheists can't have truth is like saying skeptics can't have knowledge. Spoiler alert, rocks exist whether or not you believe in Zeus. Truth isn't a members-only club where you need a deity as your plus one. However, Pastor I already forgot his name seems to think that without his specific foundation, no other foundation can exist. It's a bit like saying, if you don't start your day with coffee, you don't have a morning routine at all. This reveals a fascinating lack of imaginative empathy. It is as if they're saying, I can't imagine how anyone could ground their understanding of reality without my specific beliefs, therefore it must be impossible. Another fun fact, different philosophical frameworks exist. Shocking, I know. Now the claim that everything is subjective for atheists is particularly ironic. Let's think about this. In a religious perspective, I had a personal experience with God that you can't verify or test. From a scientific perspective, here's a hypothesis we can test, verify, and replicate. Which one sounds more objective to you? So how do we actually find truth? Well, we have subjective experiences. Everyone does. We then check these experiences against reality. We verify these things with others. We then test the predictions, and we adjust our understanding based on results. This method works whether you believe in one god, many gods, or no gods. It's like gravity. It functions regardless of your personal belief about it. So now I gotta give this guy a reality check. The irony is that it is often religious thinking that relies heavily on subjective experiences while rejecting the testing phase. It's like having a hypothesis but being offended when someone suggests running an experiment. Truth isn't determined by how strongly you believe something. If it were, we'd have to accept that the Earth is simultaneously flat, hollow, and shaped like a dinosaur, because someone somewhere believes each of these with absolute certainty. But to wrap up this part, can atheists have access to truth? Well, given that truth is that which comports to reality as adjudicated by predictive power, I'd say we're doing just fine. We might not have a cosmic certainty, but we've got something better, a method for finding out what is actually true, regardless of what we wish or believe. Besides, if your argument against atheism is, without God you can't know anything, I have to wonder, how did you come to know that?
that's why I think ultimately over the last 20 years, as society has become more secular, I think this is the root cause behind all of the insanity and chaos that we see around us, especially in the West.
Now we arrive at perhaps the boldest claim yet, that increasing secularization over the last 20 years is the root cause behind all the insanity and chaos that we see around us. But yes, the classic, everything's going to hell in a handbasket argument. It is as timeless as it is incorrect. So let's look at the evidence. First, we need to address the elephant in the room. We're living in arguably the best time to be alive in all of human history. I know, shocking, right? Despite what your favorite doom-scrolling newsfeed might suggest, by almost every measurable metric, things are actually pretty good. Global poverty is at historic lows. Life expectancy is up. Violent crime is down. Access to education is higher than ever. And child mortality is drastically been reduced. But don't take my word for it. Crack open Steven Pinker's The Better Angels of Our Nature if you want a more full statistical smorgasbord. Now let's discuss the logical gymnastics at play here. Here he's committed the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. That's Latin for after this, therefore because of this. And yes, I'm showing off my Latin to sound smart. Is it working? It's like saying, I started wearing a lucky hat, the local sports team started winning, therefore my hat is causing the wins. Just because two things happen around the same time doesn't mean one caused the other. Correlation doesn't equal causation, as any statistician will tell you, usually while sighing heavily. So here's where it gets really interesting. If we look at the most secular countries in the world, we find something that might surprise our chaos prophesying friend. We see lower crime rates, better education, higher quality of life, better healthcare, and stronger social safety nets. Countries like Denmark, Norway, and Japan, some of the more secular nations in the world, are hardly the hellscapes its arguments would predict. Instead, they're more like, well, really nice places to live. Are there problems in the world? Absolutely. Is there some chaos and insanity? Sure. But is it because people are less likely to believe in supernatural beings? Well, that would be quite a leap. It's worth noting that the most religious periods in history weren't exactly known for their peace, tranquility, and rational discourse. The Dark Ages weren't called that because I was running around affecting the mood lighting. Though imagine if we applied this logic to other correlations. Ice cream sales increase in the summer. Crime rates also increase in the summer. Therefore, ice cream causes crime. Quick, ban the rocky road before it leads to more robberies. But the secularization leads to chaos argument isn't just wrong. It's demonstrably wrong. It's the kind of claim that sounds profound until you actually look at the evidence, at which point it dissolves faster than a communion wafer in hot coffee. If anything, the data suggests that secular societies tend to be more stable, peaceful, and prosperous, not because secularism magically makes everything better, but because societies that embrace rational, evidence-based thinking tend to make better decisions. So, if morality can only come from religion, shouldn't prisons be filled with atheists instead of being disproportionately populated by the religious? I'm just saying.
The Christian is rooted in the Word of God. That is our epistemic basis for understanding of anything, right? That is our epistemic basis of understanding of principles of moral truths and for matters of faith. If you do not have a basis of understanding for moral truths, right, or for basic facts, you are going to eventually fall into absurdity because you don't have any basis for your understanding of anything.
The idea that you need a specific religious framework to understand basic facts is not just wrong, again, it's demonstrably wrong. Scientists, philosophers, and thinkers of all stripes, religious and non-religious alike, have been successfully discovering and understanding facts about our universe using reason, evidence, and the scientific method. Yes, there are many questions we still can't answer, but I don't know, let's find out has consistently proven more reliable than God did it. Stop asking questions. Remember, in the history of ever, no scientific theory has been replaced by a religious explanation, but plenty of religious explanations have been replaced by scientific ones. In the end, perhaps the most basic fact of all of this, you don't need a divine decoder ring to understand reality. You just need curiosity, reason, and a willingness to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to a universe that's far more amazing and mysterious than any religious text ever imagined.
Let me give you an example. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I was telling him under the atheist worldview, or even just an agnostic worldview, you really don't have any basis for understanding of anything.
Another one of these, huh? The claim that agnostics have no basis for understanding anything isn't just wrong, it's wrong on so many levels. It's practically a multidimensional wrongness fractal. Agnosticism at its core is about intellectual honesty. It's saying, I don't know, when faced with questions that, by definition, can't be definitively answered. This position of humble uncertainty is not a weakness. It's the foundation of all genuine learning and understanding. Because here's the thing. Real knowledge doesn't start with certainty. It starts with questions, with doubt, with, I don't know, let's find out. Hey, I can rhyme. So the next time someone tells you that being unsure about God means you can't understand anything, remember, uncertainty didn't stop us from splitting the atom, curing diseases, or inventing pizza. And those seem like pretty good accomplishments for people who supposedly can't understand anything. Besides, if certainty about God is required for understanding, how did the person making this argument come to understand that? Reminds me of another question I just asked.
And eventually we got to the point in the conversation where, we're talking about evidence, and he's like, well, how do I accept any evidence? Because somebody could have corrupted this, somebody could have corrupted that. He's like, and eventually it got to the point where he was like, I presented evidence to the contrary, but eventually he got to the point where he was kind of like, well, how do I even know that we're alive and we're not in some kind of a simulation? How do I know that anything is real? It's like,
well, let me tell you. As an atheist, I accept evidence the same way I accept my coffee, carefully filtered and properly grounded and probably full of mint syrup. My evidence evaluation toolkit contains a few things. First, observation, using my mysteriously functional atheist senses. Then documentation, Writing things down. Yes, we've pretty much mastered writing. Testing, which is repeating experiments, even without divine permission. Then peer review, asking other godless heathens to check my work. And then finally, statistical analysis, because math doesn't care about your beliefs. The scientific method, no deity required. I know that wasn't the full scientific method, but let's just keep moving. Somehow, despite my lack of theological conviction, I managed to form hypotheses, design experiments, collect data, analyze results, and draw conclusions, all without a single prayer. I know, shocking. But real talk, let's talk about the evidence in practice. Here's how I actually evaluate evidence, at least generally. Is it observable? Is it measurable? Is it repeatable? Has it been independently verified? Does it make accurate predictions? Notice how none of these criteria require a divine stamp of approval. When I want to know if something is true, I don't consult ancient texts or ask what Bronze Age shepherds would think, nor do I assume the conclusion and work backwards. Instead, I do something really radical. I look at the evidence. But let's say I want to know if a new medical treatment works. So first, I may look at the peer-reviewed studies. Second, I can check that methodology. Third, I can examine the sample size. Fourth, I can consider the potential biases. And finally, fifth, I can look for reproducibility. At no point do I throw up my hands and say, well, without God, how can I possibly know if this data is real? But you know what's truly ironic? The scientific method, this godless, evidence-based approach to understanding reality, has given us modern medicine, technology, our understanding of cosmos, and the device you're using to watch this video, and a ton more things, all without requiring a belief in the supernatural. But on a personal note, as an atheist, I don't claim to have all the answers. But I do have something arguably better, a reliable method for finding the answers. It's called evidence-based reasoning, and it's been working pretty well for us so far. My lack of belief in a deity does not prevent me from understanding cause and effect, or recognizing patterns, or evaluating this evidence, or making logical deductions, or even appreciating the profound mystery and wonder of existence. If anything, it enhances these abilities. When you're not constrained by predetermined conclusions, you're free to follow the evidence wherever it leads. So for the question, how do atheists accept evidence, is rather like asking, how do bald people grow hair? It's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. We accept evidence the same way anyone else does, through observation, testing, and rational analysis. The only difference is, we don't start with an answer and work backwards to justify it. Instead of, God did it, we're comfortable with, I don't know, let's find out. And you know what? That approach has taken us from caves to quantum computers. Not bad for people who supposedly can't accept evidence, right? And P.S., if you're wondering how I wrote this response without a God-given basis for understanding anything, well, let's just say that's one of life's little mysteries, isn't it?
That is the fruit of atheist thought. That is the fruit of agnostic thought.
Ah, the classic descent into hard solipsism, the philosophical equivalent of disappearing up one's own navel. Yes, navel. Fill in your own word. Sure, we can spend eternity pondering whether we're just brains in vats, characters in a cosmic simulation, or figments of some higher being's imagination, but let's be real for a moment. If that's the case, I'm currently having a riveting conversation with myself, and while I do enjoy my own company, I'd rather not waste time on philosophical tail chasing that leads absolutely nowhere. So consider this. Even if we can't prove with 100% certainty that reality is real, acting as if it is leads to far more interesting and productive outcomes. If I assume nothing is real, why bother engaging with anything? Why seek knowledge, form relationships, or try to improve the world? It's a philosophical dead end. Instead, let's make the pragmatic choice to assume reality exists and we get on with the business of living. After all, if we're wrong, what have we lost? And if we're right, think of all we stand to gain by engaging fully with the world around us.
Ultimately, you have no basis in and grounding in reality. So when you question, you're 100% pure skeptic. You question every single aspect of anything. You don't have any basis of objective truth. You reject all objective truths.
Oh, please, this tired argument again? It's a common misconception that without a deity or cosmic rulebook, we're all just moral relativists floating in a sea of subjectivity. But that's a massive leap in logic. Just because we don't believe in a divine source of morality doesn't mean we can't have objective moral standards. We can absolutely have objective morals based on reason, empathy, and the observable consequences of our actions. It's not rocket science. It's just thinking critically about what promotes well-being and reduces suffering. For instance, we can objectively state that causing unnecessary suffering is bad because we can observe and measure its negative effects. We can use reason and evidence to determine which actions lead to better outcomes for individuals and societies. Moreover, we could argue that basing morality on the changing whims of a deity, as described in many religious texts, is far more subjective than basing it on observable reality and logical reasoning. Our approach allows for moral progress as we gain new information and understanding, rather than being stuck with rules set down in ancient texts.
And everything is subjective. You don't have anything to ground your beliefs on. So you're kind of lost, quite literally lost, just kind of floating out there.
Simply because we don't buy into your particular brand of cosmic grounding doesn't mean we're untethered balloons drifting aimlessly through the existential void. This argument is a classic false dichotomy. He's saying either you accept his specific worldview or you have no foundation at all. But that's simply not the case. We've simply found different foundations, one's based on reason, evidence, and human experience, and the observable universe. It's like accusing someone of being homeless just because they don't live in your specific house. There are plenty of other dwellings out there, thank you very much. Our foundation might be built on principles like the pursuit of knowledge, the promotion of human well-being, the wonder of scientific discovery, the richness of human culture and connection, or the awe-inspiring vastness of the cosmos. These can provide just as much meaning, purpose, and ethical grounding as any religious belief system. The irony is that many people who leave religion often report feeling more grounded, not less. They simply shifted their foundation from an unverifiable supernatural realm to the tangible world around them. It's not a loss of grounding, it's a reorientation toward a different, often more solid foundation.
I eventually got to the point in the conversation, I was like, well, can you even prove that watermelon exists? And he said no. Because he can't prove that he himself exists.
Where did the watermelon come from? Did he mention this before and I just missed it? Maybe this is the fruit he was talking about before. Anyway, more solipsism shenanigans, huh? Look, even if we can't prove with 100% certainty that anything exists, including ourselves, that doesn't magically make your worldview correct. Your God-based foundation faces the exact same problem. How do you know your God isn't just a figment of your imagination in a non-existent universe? We're all in the same philosophical boat here. Might as well make the best of it and enjoy a slice of that possibly illusory watermelon. This line of argumentation is particularly puzzling coming from a religious perspective. If you can't trust your senses or reasoning enough to prove a watermelon exists, how can you trust them enough to prove the existence of a far more complex and abstract concept like a deity? The problem of hard solipsism is a philosophical puzzle that affects all worldviews equally. It's not a unique challenge to non-believers. Moreover, most of us operate on a practical level of certainty in our daily lives. We don't need to be 100% certain that the watermelon exists to enjoy eating it, just as we don't need to be 100% certain our friends exist to value their company. Absolute certainty is not required for functional belief or meaningful action in the world.
So it's very unfortunate, but I think that this is why we see the society today going the way that it is.
As I mentioned before, this is one of the best times in history to be alive. We have so many modern conveniences. Perhaps it is directly because of this that people like him think things are worse. Because thanks to modern conveniences like the internet and 24-hour news, the bad is louder and more visible.
We can't even answer simple questions like, what is a woman? A lot of people can't answer that question. That Matt Walsh movie that came out a couple years ago, a lot of different people kind of just with no basis for their beliefs in anything, can't even answer that question.
Oh boy, here we go. This argument, often trotted out as some kind of gotcha, fundamentally misunderstands how language and concepts work. Language evolves, concepts change, and definitions aren't set in stone. Shocking, I know. I've been saying that a lot recently. The idea that we can't define woman is a disingenuous oversimplification of a complex topic. There are biological, social, and personal aspects to gender identity that don't always fit into neat little boxes. Sex and gender are multifaceted concepts involving chromosomes, hormones, primary and secondary sex characteristics, gender identity, gender expression, and societal roles, and none of these are strictly binary. Instead of getting hung up on rigid definitions, maybe we could try something radical like listening to people and treating them with respect. Or how about understanding that our categories and labels are human constructs that sometimes fail to capture the full complexity of reality? Moreover, this argument often comes from the same people who insist on the importance of their religious texts that are full of terms and concepts that have been debated and reinterpreted for centuries. If we applied the same rigid demand for unchanging definitions to religious concepts, they'd be in quite a pickle. The inability to provide a simple, universal definition for a complex concept isn't a failure of modern thinking. It's a recognition of the nuances and complexities of human identity and experience. It's a sign of intellectual growth and not confusion.
I think that's why you see in one of the most secular societies today in Canada, they have moved so far away from the scriptures, they've moved so far away from any basis or understanding in truth because they're secular, they have an atheist worldview, that they have no answer for objective morality. They don't even believe in the sanctity of life. They say, well, we put dogs down when they're in pain, so why can't we just put a human being down?
The question of why we euthanize suffering animals but not humans is a classic ethical conundrum that's more complex than it appears at first glance. Sure, on the surface it seems inconsistent. We put Fido down when he's in pain, so why not Grandma? Well, let's dig a bit deeper, shall we? First off, I'm a big proponent of bodily autonomy. Your body, your choice, whether it's about tattoos, piercings, or shuffling off this mortal coil. However, the comparison between human and animal euthanasia isn't quite apples to apples. We euthanize animals out of compassion, yes, but also because their quality of life and medical options are more limited than ours. Fluffy can't exactly articulate her end-of-life wishes or weigh the pros and cons of experimental treatments. For humans, it's a whole different ballgame. We have more advanced medical care, the ability to communicate complex thoughts and wishes, and intricate social and emotional ties that complicate this decision. That said, in cases of terminal illness or extreme unrelenting suffering, I do believe assisted suicide can be a compassionate choice. The key is having robust safeguards to prevent abuse. We don't want It's a Wonderful Life turning into Logan's Run, after all. The moral question here isn't just about ending suffering, it's about autonomy, dignity, and the value we place on life versus the quality of life. It's a deeply personal decision that requires careful consideration of medical, ethical, and personal factors. In the end, perhaps the most ethical approach is to give individuals the right to make this most personal of choices for themselves, with appropriate safeguards in place.
The scripture says that human beings, we are created in the image of God, therefore our lives have intrinsic value. They have discarded that. They now have these laws that state that they can do assisted suicides, and then you have 28-year-old healthy people suffering from a bout of depression, and they're not even informing the families, but they're just going ahead with their wishes in their lives, and they're assisting them in this.
I knew he was going somewhere with this, but the claim about 28-year-olds getting euthanized for depression without informing families is a classic case of fear-mongering through misinformation. It's like claiming that people are putting razor blades in Halloween candy. Scary, but it's not actually happening. Well, let's look at the actual Canadian law, shall we? According to the Government of Canada's website on medical assistance in dying, or MAID, the eligibility criteria are quite strict. As of March 2023, mental illness alone is not an eligible condition. The person must have a grievous and irremediable medical condition, be in an advanced state of decline, and their natural death must be reasonably foreseeable. Moreover, the process involves multiple medical assessments and a mandatory waiting period, and the ability to withdraw consent at any time. It's not some drive-through service for the momentarily sad. Yes, I want assisted suicide, hold the pickles, and can I get fries with that? Yeah, no. The law also requires that the person be able to give informed consent right up until the procedure is performed. This means they must be mentally capable of understanding and appreciating the consequences of their decision. A person in the depths of a major depressive episode would likely not meet this criterion. It's also worth noting that while the law doesn't require family notification, because, adults have a right to medical privacy, no, I'm not talking about the United States with Roe versus Wade. In practice, healthcare providers strongly encourage involving loved ones in the decision-making process. So this claim, it's not just an exaggeration, it's a flat-out misrepresentation of the law and process. It's crucial to have honest, fact-based discussions about these serious topics rather than resorting to sensationalism and scare tactics.
I think a lot of atheists are starting to wake up from this, because it started about 20 or so years ago when it really started to become more and more secular society. And it was kind of just like, well, if we can't really understand, you can't understand 100%, then I'm not going to put my faith in anything. And it's just, everything is like this. Well, if the world is more and more secular, then we're going to become more and more rational and scientific as a society.
Good. As I mentioned before, pretty much every single study or poll has shown that the more secular a society is, the higher quality of life the population has. He's putting this forth as if it were a bad thing. But why wouldn't we want a more rational and scientific society?
And that has not happened. We've become less and less rational, less and less scientific as a society.
Oh, the irony of a pastor claiming we've become less rational and scientific as a society. That is rich coming from someone whose job revolves around unprovable supernatural claims. It's like a flat earther complaining that people don't understand geometry. And if you're a flat earther in my audience, I'm okay with offending you on this one. Where's the peer-reviewed study showing this decline in rationality? Or is this just an emotional response to societal changes you don't like? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like we're making some pretty impressive strides in the rationality department. If anything, we're seeing increased scientific literacy, with more people than ever pursuing higher education in STEM fields. Just look at the rapid development of COVID vaccines. We went from identifying a new virus to having multiple effective vaccines in less than a year. That's not a mark of an irrational society, that's a scientific triumph. Or how about our ability to detect gravitational waves, confirming a prediction made by Einstein a century ago? Or the fact that we can edit genes to cure previously incurable diseases? Or that we're exploring Mars with increasingly sophisticated rovers? Sure, we still have our fair share of flat earthers, anti-vaxxers, and people who think crystals will cure cancer, but overall, we're moving toward a more evidence-based society. More people understand the scientific method, can critically evaluate sources, and value empirical evidence over anecdotes or tradition. The internet and social media have certainly amplified some anti-scientific voices, but they've also democratized access to scientific information. A curious person today can access more scientific knowledge from their smartphone than was available in the world's best libraries a few decades ago. So no, Pastor, we haven't become less rational or scientific. We've just become less willing to accept claims without evidence, including religious ones, and that's not a bug, it's a feature.
We've fundamentally rejected the basic understanding of any kind of genetics. Gender doesn't exist. It's just a construct now. Morality is all subjective. There's no fundamental truth anymore.
The actual gender debate. It was only a matter of time before we got here, wasn't it? But let's clear this up. Gender and biological sex are different things. Sex is about biology, chromosomes, hormones, and physical characteristics. Gender, on the other hand, is about social roles, personal identity, and cultural expectations. And yes, gender is a social construct, and it always has been. That's why gender roles and expectations vary across cultures and throughout history. In some cultures, pink is for boys and blue is for girls. In others, men wear what we consider skirts. It's not some newfangled idea, it's just that we're now acknowledging this complexity instead of shoving everyone into rigid boxes labeled Mars and Venus. As for morality being subjective, well, yes and no. We start with subjective values like well-being matters, but from there we can make objective evaluations. It's like in chess. The rules are arbitrary, but once we agree on them, we can make objective statements about good and bad moves. Similarly, if we're agreeing that minimizing suffering is good, a subjective starting point, we can objectively evaluate actions based on whether they increase or decrease suffering. And no foundational truth? Please. We have plenty of foundational truths. They're just based on evidence and reason rather than ancient texts. The laws of physics, the principles of knowledge, the findings of rigorous scientific inquiry, these are our foundational truths. They're not absolute or unchanging because we're humble enough to admit that we might be wrong and adjust our understanding as new evidence emerges. That's not a weakness, it's the greatest strength of the scientific method. In essence, recognizing the complexity of gender, the nuanced nature of morality, and the evolving nature of our understanding of truth doesn't mean we're lost in a sea of relativism. It means we're mature enough to grapple with the complexities of reality rather than clinging to oversimplified absolutes.
Which ultimately I think leads to depression and hopelessness. Because in reality, if this is all there is, you should be depressed. Because nothing you do matters. If you're an atheist, there's nothing that comes after this. Nothing you do matters.
The idea that atheists must be depressed because nothing matters is a massive oversimplification that misunderstands both atheism and the nature of meaning. It's like saying people who don't believe in Santa must hate Christmas. First of all, plenty of religious people suffer from depression too. It's not an atheist exclusive club. I suffered from depression as a Christian, so clearly belief in an afterlife isn't some magical shield against mental health issues. Secondly, why would a lack of an afterlife make this life meaningless? If anything, it makes our actions here and now even more significant. If this is the only life we get, doesn't it make it infinitely precious? Doesn't it make how we treat each other and what we do with our time supremely important? What I do matters to me, to the people around me, and to those who come after me. If one of my YouTube videos makes someone think differently and it leads them to volunteer or be kinder, that's a real tangible impact. It doesn't need eternal consequences to be meaningful. But consider this. If you're at a party, do you refuse to enjoy it because it'll end? Or do you savor every moment because it's fleeting? Life is that party. The fact that it is not eternal doesn't make it meaningless, it makes it precious. And let's flip this around. If the only reason you're doing good is for a heavenly reward or to avoid hell, is that really moral? Isn't it more admirable to do good simply because it's the right thing to do, rather than out of a hope of reward or fear of punishment? In the end, meaning isn't something handed down from on high, it's something we create through our choices and our relationships and our actions. And many atheists find deep, lasting meaning in pursuing knowledge, in creating art, in fighting for justice, and loving their families, and experiencing the wonders of the universe. No deity required.
You can work, build your career, chase good relationships, find love. Those are all wonderful things. But eventually, they're going to leave you empty because at the end of your life, you don't take any of that with you. You're just in a race to collect a bunch of toys and collect your retirement and die. And that's it. If that is your basis of reality, if you are a canary in a cage and you look around and you're saying, this is all this is, there's nothing else, you should be depressed. And I think a lot of people are. A lot of people who have fallen into this atheist worldview are. There was a reason why all of our forefathers thought it was very important to be rooted in faith. It's because they understood that this is a fundamental foundational truth upon which all reality is based upon. When you abandon this, you abandon your grip on reality. You abandon your grip on truth. Now, when you're a Christian, there is something after this. Your life has meaning. You are working towards an eternal goal.
Look, I'm glad you find meaning in your faith. Truly, I am. But don't assume that's the only source for meaning in the universe. It's like saying the only way to quench thirst is with Coca-Cola. Sure, it works for you, but there's a whole world of beverages out there. My life has plenty of meaning. It's what I choose to put into it. I find meaning in learning, in teaching, in connecting with others, in experiencing the wonders of the universe. Again, no deity required. When I look up at the night sky and contemplate the vast cosmic ocean we're floating in, I'm filled with awe. And when I help a student grasp a difficult concept and I see that aha moment on their face, that's meaningful. When I work on a project that might make the world a little bit better, even in a small way, that's purposeful. The beauty of finding your own meaning is that it is tailored to you. It's not a one-size-fits-all proposition handed down from on high. It's a bespoke suit of purpose, cut to fit your unique shape. And here's the kicker. Even if there were a God, wouldn't they be more impressed by someone who found meaning and did good without the promise of eternal rewards? In the end, meaning isn't about what happened after you die. It's about what you do while you're alive. And there's more than enough meaning to be found in this one precious life we know we have.
You are grounded in objective moral truths. Not only that, what secular society has taken from people is it's taken fellowship away from them. You are all isolated and separated. You don't have community anymore.
The claim that secular society has taken away fellowship is about as accurate as saying the internet has made people less connected. It's not just wrong, it's the opposite of reality. Have you heard of this newfangled thing called the internet, or sports clubs, or volunteer organizations? There are countless ways to build community that don't involve religious beliefs. It's like complaining that there's no food while standing in the grocery store. Personally, I have a vibrant community. There are atheist societies, skeptics groups, and countless secular organizations where people come together. Heck, I have a whole family of friends I see at conventions. We debate ideas, share experiences, and support each other. You know, all those things you think only happens in churches. And let's not forget the power of a good karaoke night. Nothing builds community quite like butchering Don't Stop Believin' together. It's like a secular communion, but with less off-key singing and even less guilt. The truth is, secular society hasn't taken away community, it's just changed its form. We're no longer limited to connecting with people who happen to live in our village or belong to our local church. We can find our tribe based on shared interests, values, passions, regardless of our geography or background. That's not a loss, that's an incredible gain.
Which is why you see a lot of these despondent youth joining these fringe political ideologies, because they're looking for belonging in all of the wrong places.
Calling political ideas you disagree with wrong is, again, a bit rich. Different, sure. Potentially harmful? Well, maybe. But wrong? That is a strong claim that needs strong evidence. It's like calling someone's taste in music wrong because they prefer jazz to classical. And let's not forget, what's considered fringe often changes over time. Yesterday's radicals are today's moderates. Remember when women voting was a fringe idea? Or when suggesting that maybe the monarchy isn't the best system of government was considered radical? Now, to be fair, there are indeed some ideologies that I would consider wrong by definition, specifically those that promote harm, inequality, or oppression. But I suspect that's not what's being referred to here. More likely, it's just a knee-jerk reaction to ideas that challenge the status quo. The reality is that political ideologies are complex systems of thought, often with nuanced positions on a wide range of issues. Dismissing them as simply wrong without engaging with their actual arguments is intellectually lazy at best and dangerously close-minded at worst. Instead of labeling ideologies we don't understand or agree with as wrong, perhaps we should try to understand why they appeal to people. What needs are they addressing? What frustrations are they tapping into? Only by understanding can we hope to address the root issues and find common ground.
When all of our forefathers found belonging within the church, found belonging within fellowship with their neighbor, we would meet together once a week, meet our neighbors, greet them, get to know the people in your community, and really just be involved in each other's lives. They've taken this from you. The people pushing this atheist worldview, secular society has taken this from you. If you are not attending a church and you're just doing your Christian walk solo, or if you're an atheist and you have no involvement in community whatsoever, this has been taken from you. There is a reason why you feel so lonely.
The implication that atheists have no community involvement is not just false, it's laughably out of touch with reality. It's like claiming vegetarians have no food options because they don't eat at steakhouses. There are countless secular volunteer organizations, social clubs, and community groups. Just last night, as of writing this script, I made blankets for Habitat for Humanity with the local organizations. We laughed, we chatted, we had dinner, we did some good for our community, and not once did we need to invoke a deity. Community hasn't been taken from us, we're just finding it in different places. We build communities around shared interests, shared values, and shared goals. Whether it's a book club, a hiking group, a coding boot camp, or a social justice organization, secular communities are thriving. But here's the kicker. These communities often bring together people from diverse backgrounds who might have never connected in more traditional segregated religious communities. We're not losing community, we're expanding it. Moreover, the idea that you need to be part of an organized religion to have a fulfilling spiritual or philosophical life is just plain wrong. Many people find deep meaning and growth in personal study, meditation, or informal discussions with like-minded individuals. A solo walk doesn't mean you're lost. Sometimes it means you're forging your own path.
At least when you're in high school, teenagers, this doesn't apply to you so much.
It's almost like school itself is a massive social environment. It's not just about academics, it's a daily immersion in peer interaction, relationship building, and social learning. And what about sports teams, clubs, social media, or just hanging out with friends? Teenagers today are more connected than ever before, for better or worse. Sure, the pandemic changed things for a while, but social interaction isn't dead. It has evolved. Teens are connecting through online gaming, social media, video chats, and yes, even in person. Gasp. Then why exclude teenagers anyway?
But adults, after high school, when there's nothing binding you to meet with people once a week or meet with people on a regular basis, a lot of people notice that they feel very, very alone because there is nothing that is getting them to interact with other people. And it's not as if you're going to go to the mall and start talking to strangers regularly. I would think there's maybe some people who do that, but it's kind of a rare thing.
Why do you think bars do so well? I mean, I go for karaoke. He presents a perceived problem with secular societies that he claims the solution has been taken away, and then he brings up a secular solution that is still available and still happens, though less frequently. It reminds me of when one of our last presidents was talking about building a wall and how when they got up there, people wouldn't be able to get down. Then he said, well, maybe a rope.
There's no ladder going over that. If they ever get up there, they're in trouble. Because there's no way to get down. Maybe a rope.
But it's robbed you of your purpose. You now have no purpose in life. Well, great. My purpose is to get a good job and to work really hard. Wonderful. If that is your purpose, you take nothing with you when you die. Everything that you do here is ultimately pointless because at the end of your life, it is washed away. Like you're building a sand castle in the sand, the tide comes and washes it away. It's as if you were never even here. Every little thing that you've done in your entire life, meaningless after your death. Didn't mean a thing. That's depressing.
The claim that everything becomes meaningless after death if you're an atheist is about as logical as saying a book loses all value once you've finished reading it. Just because I won't exist after death doesn't mean my actions don't matter. Again, it's like saying the Apollo missions were meaningless because the astronauts aren't on the moon anymore. As I stated before, the ripple effects of our actions continue long after we're gone. Every person I've influenced, every idea I've shared, every kind of act I've done, these things persist. They shape the world in small but real ways. As I say, one of the goals of this channel is to help people think a little bit differently. If someone does because they watch one of my YouTube videos and that lesson inspired them to help volunteer and pursue a new passion, then what I did in my life had that lasting effect. And even if they didn't, they still mattered in the moment they happened. The fact that something ends doesn't negate its value while it existed. A sunset isn't meaningless because it's temporary. In fact, its transience makes it more precious. Moreover, the argument seems to imply that the only things that matter are eternal things. But that's a pretty bizarre standard. Here's one of my issues with it. Does that mean that doing something that won't affect your chances of going to heaven doesn't matter? If I, as an atheist, were to donate my time to a soup kitchen and help feed homeless people, was my action meaningless because it won't affect my afterlife status? In reality, what I do matters infinitely more because I believe this is the only life we have. Every moment counts. Every action has weight because there are no do-overs. There's no eternal afterwards to make up for missed opportunities. That's not depressing. That's empowering. It means we have the responsibility and the privilege to make this life count, to leave the world a little better than we found it.
But that's the worldview that you're operating under, and it's no surprise why there is an increase in the rate of people who are taking antidepressants and other medications like this, because we've become more and more secular.
The old correlation equals causation fallacy. This is a classic for a reason, I suppose. But let's break this down, shall we? First off, correlation does not equal causation, my friend. The increase in antidepressant use could be due to many factors. Better mental health awareness, reduced stigma, improved access to healthcare, or even overprescription. It is a complex issue that can't be boiled down to secularism did it. This is like blaming the rise in autism diagnoses on organic food sales. As I keep saying, two trends happening at the same time don't necessarily have a causal relationship. Moreover, maybe people are addressing their mental health issues instead of suppressing them, and it's actually a good thing. In many religious communities, mental health issues are still stigmatized or seen as spiritual failings rather than medical conditions. The increase in antidepressant use might actually indicate that more people are getting the help they need instead of suffering in silence. Let's also consider that many deeply religious societies have high rates of antidepressant use. Utah, one of the most religious states in the US, consistently ranks high in antidepressant use. How does that fit into secularism causes depression narrative? Furthermore, many secular countries, particularly in Scandinavia, consistently rank as the happiest in the world. If secularism inevitably led to depression, we'd expect to see the opposite. The reality is that mental health is influenced by a complex interplay of biological, psychological, and social factors. Trying to pin it on any single cause, especially one as broad as secularism, is a gross oversimplification that does a disservice to those struggling with mental health issues. Instead of making unfounded claims, perhaps we should focus on destigmatizing mental health treatment, improving access to care, and creating a society that supports overall well-being, regardless of religious beliefs or lack thereof.
But the important thing is, if you are a Christian, if you have a foundation of faith in Jesus Christ, you now go from being that ant that's building the sandcastle on the beach, the tide washes it away and it means nothing, to being an ant that carries grains of gold to put onto the throne of Christ. You are building towards something eternal. You're not just wasting your time. There is something more to this. You're the canary in the cage that knows there is more to this. You were made to be soaring. You were made to be flying through the sky. You were made for so much more than what is right here. You have eternal life. This isn't it.
Oh, this is a lovely sentiment, I'll grant you. It's comforting, it's poetic, and I'm sure it brings a lot of people peace. But here's the thing, there's no evidence to back it up. It's a comforting story, sure, but comfort doesn't equal truth. It's like telling a child there's a tooth fairy. It might make them feel better about losing a tooth, but it doesn't make it real. The idea that we're made for something implies a maker, a purpose given to us from outside ourselves. But what if we weren't made at all? What if we're the result of billions of years of evolution, a beautiful accident of nature? Does that make us any less valuable or our lives any less meaningful? I'd argue it makes us more remarkable. We weren't designed for a purpose. We get to choose our purpose. We're not characters in someone else's story. We're authors of our own narrative. That's not a diminishment. That's an empowerment. And as for eternal life, well, that's a big claim that requires big evidence. And so far, all the evidence we have points to our consciousness being a product of our physical brains. When the brain stops functioning, consciousness ends. That might seem scary, but it also means that this life, right here, right now, is incredibly precious. We don't get a do-over or an eternal encore. This is our one shot to experience the world, to love, to learn, to make a difference. And in the end, I'd rather face reality as it is than cling to a comforting fiction. Because the truth is, reality is pretty amazing on its own. We're made of stardust. We're the universe becoming conscious of itself. We're the result of an unbroken chain of life stretching back billions of years. That's pretty much more, if you ask me.
If this was it, if this is all there is, that really sucks. Because this is not much to live for. Live for something greater than yourself.
Live for something greater than yourself, he says, as if atheists are all just selfish hedonists lounging around in our godless dens of iniquity.
I love life and its pleasures as much as anyone here, except perhaps you, hedonism bot. But we need to be shut off, especially you, hedonism bot.
I apologize for nothing.
Well, surprise, we do live for something greater than ourselves. Many of us live for the betterment of humanity, the pursuit of knowledge, for the protection of our planet. These are pretty great causes, I'd say. When I work on educational content, I'm living for something greater than myself. I'm contributing to the spread of knowledge and critical thinking. When I volunteer, I'm living for something greater than myself. I'm helping improve my community. When I advocate for science and reason, I'm living for something greater than myself. I'm promoting a way of thinking that can help us solve global problems. The irony is that by focusing on this life rather than an afterlife, many atheists are more motivated to make a positive difference in the here and now. We don't believe in divine intervention or a cosmic plan. We believe that if we want the world to be better, it's up to us to make it so. Moreover, the whole concept of living for something greater is not the exclusive domain of religion. Humanists have been promoting this idea for centuries. The difference is that we don't need the promise of eternal rewards or the threat of eternal punishment to motivate us. We do it because it's the right thing to do. It's because it makes the world better. It's because it gives our lives meaning and purpose. In the end, living for something greater than yourself isn't about believing in a deity. It's about recognizing our connection to the rest of humanity and the natural world, and choosing to act in ways that benefit more than just ourselves. And that's something anyone can do, believer or not.
Secular society has robbed you of your sense of community, of your sense of wonder, your sense of faith, and your grounding in objective truth. You have been robbed of these things.
Excluding the sense of faith, which I'm 100% okay with getting rid of, just like I mentioned before, none of this is true. I still experience community. I still have a great sense of wonder, especially when I look up at the stars. I also have the effects of reality as a grounding in objective truth, for which I can verify with others. Secular society hasn't robbed us of wonder, it's given us new sources of it. The vastness of the cosmos, the intricacies of evolution, the mysteries of quantum physics, these fill me with far more awe than any religious text. And as for community and grounding in truth, we have those too. They're just based on reality rather than mythology.
But you can reclaim them by professing your faith in Jesus Christ and getting involved in a local church.
And how exactly would believing in Mr. Jesus give me back these things that I haven't lost? I have community, I have wonder, I have a grounding in observable reality. Faith isn't necessary for any of these.
I pray that the people that are watching this video understand this and they reclaim what modern society has stolen from them. Your forefathers understood this. Your forefathers understood the importance of having a solid grounding in faith.
Ah, yes, because our forefathers were infallible, right? They also thought slavery was okay and women shouldn't vote. Maybe, just maybe, we've learned a few things since then. I think I'll stick with modern knowledge and ethics, thanks. However, in conclusion, while I respect your right to find meaning in your faith, the idea that secular life is somehow lesser or lacking is simply not supported by the evidence. We find meaning, community, and wonder in abundance. We just don't need to invoke anything supernatural.
And I think we are seeing a lot of young men and women reclaiming what has been taken from them. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching. God bless.
And that's the end of the video. So what was Mr. Cleaver trying to say here? Let me go over what I think are the 10 main points. Atheism offers no foundation for truth, leaving everything subjective and causing societal chaos, especially in secular societies. The Christian worldview, grounded in the Word of God, provides an epistemic basis for understanding truth, moral principles, and faith. Without a foundation for objective truths, atheists fall into absurdity, skepticism, and lack of grounding in reality. Atheistic thinking leads to doubt about evidence, reality, and even basic existence, as seen in a conversation where a person couldn't prove their own existence. The rise of secularism has led to society rejecting objective truths, resulting in confusion, especially on topics like gender and morality. In places like Canada, secular and atheist beliefs had led to acceptance of assisted suicide even for healthy individuals suffering from temporary conditions like depression. Atheism causes hopelessness and depression because if nothing comes after life, then nothing one does ultimately matters. Christian faith gives life purpose, grounding in eternal truth and objective morality, while atheism leaves people without meaning or community. Secularism has stripped society of community, purpose, and grounding in truth, leading people to feel isolated and lost. Faith in Mr. Jesus and involvement in a local church can help reclaim what secular society has stolen, offering purpose, truth, and community. It doesn't look like anything I haven't seen before, and even anything remotely close to new contains an unfounded assertion that Seat A very likely cannot back up. So now I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you see his position as comporting to reality? If so, what sort of predictive power does this position have? Let me know in the comments below. That's it for this one. So what do you think? Did you find this guy convincing? Or do you think that his position has been cleft to antiquity, where it belongs? I think that his mindset is likely very traditionalist and potentially very regressive. He definitely comes off like someone who wants to go back to the good old days where everyone was just like him and people who were different just stayed in the closet. Well, times keep changing and you either keep up or you get left behind. And his name is very apt. He is desperately clinging to the old ways and saying that it is no longer the way it used to be. I would guess it's because, looking at him, he was probably part of a favored majority for a very long time. So reverting back to the old days doesn't sound so bad, because for the last almost 2 millennia, he, or at least his religion, has been looked upon favorably, so there is little downside to reverting back to old policies for him. And that is the problem.
I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it, and what's it seems weird and scary to me. It'll happen to you.
As I approach my undoubtedly midlife crisis, I sincerely hope I never end up thinking like this. I consider myself pretty progressive, and I recognize that most change I experience in my life is for the better. And in my society, most change is for the betterment of society, because we, as a species, tend to weed out those who wish to do harm to our species. I give this video a full 10 facepalming Mr. Jesuses out of 10 for the wild accusations he definitely cannot back up, repeating himself, and very likely simply parroting arguments, like him trying to bring up the moral argument, but I don't think he actually knows how to present it properly, and definitely not what the terms he's using actually mean. He, like many apologists, fails to practice a modicum of empathy. With that, I'm not sure he deserves my response. More like, at best, he deserves pity for his inability to be empathetic. On that note, if you enjoyed the worldview or non-worldview that I shared here today, hit that like button. Though you can be part of my society here on the YouTubes by hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. Speaking of my society, I need to thank my society of patrons: Calamitous Anima, Sora, Long-Haired Lefty, Musical Ocelot, Ooga Booga Luga, Anonymous Netizen, Angel, Tarek Alkasab, Gemabomb, Kai Henningsen, and Triple Towel, who are the sharpening blocks to the butcher's knife against bad arguments that is my channel. Though if you would like to help cleave some antiquated thought, you can join them for as low as a single dollar a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. But seriously, thank you to all of you who subscribe, share my videos on other platforms, hang out in the Discord, and especially those who like what I do enough to slide me a couple bucks. You all mean the world to me, and without all of your support, I know I would not have gotten my channel this far. Thank you. And as always, keep learning.